Hi, students. Welcome back to another week. We are on week 2, and I just want to go through a couple Blackboard things just for some quick reminders. So, if you look here on your left side and you go below course content, you're going to see right here where it says course materials, weekly assignments, and lectures. And here we are right here in week 2. And just as a little refresher, remember that your objectives are always going to be on that folder as well as your homework assignment. So if you're ever questioning what's due or what you're supposed to be working on that week, that is where you are going to find that. This week, we are going to be talking about the writing process. We're going to do just kind of a brief overview of what those steps look like. And then as the semester progresses, we're going to be tangibly walking through those steps with your essays, with some of our lectures, with homework assignments. But today, I just want to give you a brief overview of everything that we're going to be working on and discussing as the semester begins. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Let me make sure I am sharing the right one. Great. Okay. So here we are. So let's talk writing process. The first thing that I want you guys to think of is, what do I need to consider? So the real question here is, what is your purpose? What is the message that you are trying to convey? As a writer, there are a multitude of reasons that you choose to write, and you have to consider the message that you are trying to say. What are you attempting to articulate? Guys, this is just a really good question. Wherever you choose to write, whether it's at your desk, whether it's at your kitchen table, whether it's in your bedroom, this is a question to have on your computer, somewhere beside of you. What am I trying to say here? What is the point? A really good thing that I would recommend you doing as you're brainstorming, and we're going to talk about that process in a little bit, you should know what that answer is before you ever start that paper. And why is that? It's so that as you're writing, you can look back to that purpose and you can say, okay, this is the point of my paper. This is what I set out to write about. And if you're ever in the middle of something and you realize that you're straying from that purpose, that gives you something to go back to. That gives you something to look back at and go, okay, how do I get back on track here? So here's a few things to consider. These are purposes or reasons why we write. You might be telling about something. You might be explaining something. You might be showing someone how to do something. You might be convincing or persuading readers. You might be encouraging readers. You might be giving information. You might be describing how. You might be teaching. You might be giving an example. You might be introducing your readers to something. You might be revealing something, giving suspense, giving an account of, illustrating, or discussing. Now, when you get your handout, okay, like for example, this week you're going to be getting the eulogy handout. When you look down these items, I want you to think for a moment, what do you think you're trying to do in the eulogy? If you've looked down these items and you've been thinking, okay, what am I doing here? There's really a couple things you're doing. You're giving an account of a life, right? You're showing a life of someone. And you might even be trying to encourage your readers in that process. You might be trying to show them something about that person's life and therefore encouraging them to live their life in a specific way. So it might be a couple things, but it's important that you understand what your purpose is in that essay. The next thing that we need to talk about is, who do I need to consider? That's the second question you're going to be asking. When you're in the process of writing a paper, it's easy to forget that you are writing to somebody. Whether you've thought about this consciously or not, you are always writing to an audience. You are always writing to a specific person or a specific group. Sometimes your audience is a general group of people, it's no one special, but sometimes you might know the individuals who make up your audience. And sometimes you're writing for yourself, right? If you're journaling, if you're recounting something, if you are trying to understand or process something, you might even be writing to yourself. Keeping your audience in mind while you write can help you make good decisions about what to include, how to organize those ideas, and how to support your argument. One of the things that you might want to consider, if you've ever been to a funeral and you've heard someone giving a eulogy, they may make a joke, right? They might use a joke, or they may do like a little inside cliche that the whole family knows. The reason that they're doing it is they know their audience. They know how this person is connected to the person who had just passed away. So that's something to consider as you're writing this eulogy. Be funny, be engaging, use things that you probably would not use maybe in an academic paper or an argumentative paper. A few questions to ask yourself. Do you have more than one audience? If so, how many do you have? Does your assignment give itself any clues about your audience? What are they the least likely to care about? What is most important to them? What kind of organization would help you understand, your audience understand what you're trying to write? What do you have to say, or what are you doing that might surprise your audience? What do you want your audience to think, learn, or assume? Guys, these are really, really important questions. When you are considering your purpose, okay, what is the point of my paper? It automatically should push you to think, what do I want this person to know when they walk away? What do I want them to think? What do I want them to learn? What do I want them to know when they walk away? What impression do you want your writing or your research to convey? These two questions, they have to go hand in hand. Before you start any essay, before you start any part of the writing process, you have to ask yourself these two key questions. What is my purpose? What am I trying to get at? And who am I trying to get that purpose, that point, that essay to? What am I trying to say? And who am I trying to say that to? So those two questions lead us into talking about the writing process. So there's really 4 steps to the writing process. Brainstorming, okay, and I'm sure some of you have worked through some of these in some of your high school classes and even middle school. Planning and outlining, drafting, and then revising and editing. And guys, the most important thing for you to know about this process, okay, this is fluid. Okay, I'm going to say that one more time. This is a fluid process. It changes, and it changes from class to class. It changes from year to year. It changes from situation to situation. One of the most important things to do is, after this process is complete, after you've turned that essay in, one of the most important key elements that students often forget is reflecting on it. Okay, asking yourself, what worked? What didn't work? What needs to stay the same? What needs to change? These questions are pivotal for you to ask yourself because the reality is your process is going to change. You are going to switch things up based off what you are learning about yourself as you're writing these papers. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is brainstorming, okay? There are a multitude of ways to brainstorm, and that's going to look different for every single person. A few methods, free writing, okay? Sitting down, taking a piece of paper, sketching out 10 to 15 things that pop into your brain. A Venn diagram, a spider diagram. I'm sure some of you have seen that. It's the circle. You put your big idea in the middle. You start drawing legs and getting more ideas on the outside. Drawing pictures, making lists, group thinking and collaboration. Maybe brainstorming for you looks like sitting down at your kitchen table and talking to your mom and dad and saying, okay, here's a couple ideas that I've come up with. What do y'all think? Or maybe it's sitting down with your boyfriend or your girlfriend or people in your class. Okay, you could collaborate with your classmates and say, all right, let's sit here and let's think. What do you think about this idea? What questions do you have? What do you not understand? What do you think I need to change? Guys, all of these are really great ways to brainstorm. When you brainstorm, the idea you end with should ultimately lead to your thesis statement. Now, some of you may be saying, what is a thesis? Well, a thesis is the main idea of your paper, okay? It is the idea that when someone walks away from your paper in 1 or 2 sentences, they're able to say, this is what that paper was about. Okay. And a thesis statement can be two things. It can be explicit or it can be implied. Explicit is when you're reading an introduction, and at the very end of that introduction, it is clear as day. That's your thesis statement. However, a lot of eulogies are implied. A lot of eulogies, you might hear someone give the introduction comments, those opening statements, but by the end of it, you're like, this is what they're trying to say about that person. They said 5, 6, 7 things, but this is the real point. And that's an implied thesis. It's not so explicit, it's not so in your face, but you do know the message that they were trying to convey. Make sure that you explore all of your ideas. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit more about this, and we're going to talk about Anne Lamott. She's a wonderful writer and author, and she really hits home on this idea of think about everything, flesh out every idea, the good ones, the bad ones, the in-between ones, because that's what leads to some of the best ideas that you're going to come up with. I'm not going to play this, but you have this Prezi linked in your weekly lecture. It walks through some different brainstorming techniques. So brainstorming is new to you and it's something you've never done before. I would highly recommend that you jump on this YouTube and just watch them flesh out some of the details of that. The next thing we're going to talk about is step 2, which is planning and outlining. Guys, outlining is kind of, it's something that I do a lot in this class. I'm going to have you do it with every essay because it really does help you organize your thoughts. Once you get through the brainstorming and you've decided what you're going to write about and you know your topic, outlining does a really good job of helping you learn how to create paragraphs, create things cohesively with some method and an organizational pattern. However, outlining is optional after this class. Once you go to some of your other classes and you really have your process nailed down, you may choose to skip this step. I think it's essential for new writers. I think it's essential even for some people who are expert writers. Even someone who's as an English major in my field, I still like to do very quick outlines before I write something. An outline is a direct and clear map of your essay. It shows what each paragraph will contain, in what order those paragraphs will appear, and how those points fit together as a whole. Most outlines use bullet points or numbers to arrange information and convey those points. Outlining is a vital part of the essay planning process. It allows the writer to understand how he or she will connect that information to support the overall thesis statement and the claims of the paper. It also provides the writer with the space to manipulate ideas without having to write complete paragraphs. Outlining is a process that takes time and patience to perfect. It involves already having a working thesis statement and a general idea of your essay theme. Outlining allows the writer to not only survey the information, but to plan how they're going to communicate that to the audience. It allows the writer to experiment with style and tone, and it determines which strategies are the best. Guys, one of the beauties of an outline is once you start creating that outline, you may find yourself at the end of it going, I don't like this organization. I don't like the way that I formulated these paragraphs. I don't like the connections that they're making. And because you've only done a couple sentences, it's really easy to go back and correct that. It's really easy to go back and put this one here and this one here and to create something more cohesive. When you've written an entire paper and you get to the end of it and you realize that, then it's a lot more challenging to go back and fix that. And it takes a lot more time and effort. So here is a really good example. The introduction is going to have a hook, a working thesis statement. And I gave a little example just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. So the working thesis statement for this outline is the thrill of pursuing happiness, the experience along the way, and the knowledge that comes from trial and error provide people with more pleasure and satisfaction than the mere attainment of those desires, despite the common perception that attainment is the one and final goal. And one of the things that I need to clarify here. So for this particular outline, the example was many societies believe that the pursuit of happiness is a fundamental human right, but it is also true that the attainment of happiness remains elusive. Perhaps Bertrand Russell had it right when he said to be without some of the things you want is an indispensable part of life, part of happiness. What gives us more pleasure and satisfaction? The pursuit of our desires or actually getting them. Write a personal essay in which you draw on your own personal experiences, observations, and readings to discuss your answer to the question posed by the prompt. An effective essay will construct the argument that accounts the complexity in the opening truth statement, even if it weighs specific examples of pursuit and attainment to arrive at the conclusion. So the prompt basically is asking this question, what is more valid? Being happy, getting everything you want and being happy, or is it working towards that happiness? So this author, what they are saying is that it's actually working towards it. That the real satisfaction, the real happiness is really trial and error, working towards that goal. So their body paragraph 1, okay, so we see that they've already organized this. They have their thesis, and now they're going into their first body paragraph. The thrill of pursuing happiness. So we see this really major topic. And their topic sentence, which a topic sentence is your first sentence of your paragraph. The thrill of pursuing happiness provides people with more pleasure and satisfaction than merely attaining that desire. Okay, so we know what they're going to write about in that paragraph. Body paragraph 2, experiences while pursuing happiness. The topic sentence is the experiences gained from pursuing happiness provide people with more pleasure and satisfaction. Then body paragraph 3, the knowledge that comes from trial and error. So we see that this person believes that trying to gain happiness is really what makes life enjoyable. That's really what we're working for. Paragraph 1 is the thrill. Paragraph 2 is the experiences, and paragraph 3 is the knowledge. Okay, so we see these very clear points. And then the conclusion just kind of reiterates that thesis statement. What I want you to see, an outline doesn't have a whole lot of detail. You don't see a lot of examples. You don't see a lot of paragraph formation here, but we do see topics. And so what that writer can then do is they look at this outline and go, okay, this is weak. This is strong. I need to put this here. I need to put that there. And what they've done here is they've given themselves kind of a little preview instead of writing that entire essay. That's why we call it the planning and outlining process. So then what comes next? We draft. We've done our brainstorming. We've come up with all these great ideas. We've trashed the bad ideas. We've planned and we've outlined. We know what each paragraph is going to be about. We know what our thesis statement is. We've seen what works and what doesn't work. We've thought about our organization. So then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to draft this essay. Okay. Now, some of you, this is the part where you get really itchy, right? You don't know how to sit down. You don't know how to get it out. We're going to talk a lot about that this semester. Drafting. Almost all good writing begins with terrible first efforts. You need to start somewhere. Start by getting anything down on paper. A friend of mine says that the first draft is the down draft. You just get it down. The second draft is the up draft. You fix it up. You try to say what you have to say more accurately. And the third draft is the dental draft, where you check every tooth. You see if it's loose or cramped or decayed, or even, God help us, healthy. So here's what I want you to think. When you are sitting down and you are drafting that first paper, just get it down. Don't think about it. Don't worry about where the period goes. Don't worry about if this sentence makes sense. Don't worry about where the comma goes. Don't worry about if it's a fragment or a run-on or a comma slice. And we're going to talk about what all those are later. But don't worry about those things. Just get it down on paper. And then the second draft that you're creating, I want you to go back to that draft and go, okay, what's working here? What's not working here? And then the third time is when you really start checking your nuts and bolts. Don't be afraid to simply get it down on paper. Many students are far too concerned with getting their work perfect the first time. This is what creates writer's block. A lot of you have heard that term, or you've probably said it yourself. I've got writer's block. I just can't write this essay. Remember, there is a reason that we have an editing and revising step in this process. Use it. Get your ideas on paper and walk away. Walk away from your work. This is why it is critical that you work on your papers early, because you don't want to rush this part of the process. I can't stress enough how important it is that after you finish writing a paper, you take the time to go do something else. This is why you shouldn't wait until the night before a paper is due. Write it, go for a run. Write it, go back to it in 2 days. Write it, go have dinner. But don't write it and sit there and read it over and over and over again. That comes at a different time, and you need that time to go back with a fresh brain. And then finally, the last step, revising and editing. Guys, I have this checklist in your Blackboard page, and I'm going to show you where that's at. But let's talk a little bit about the difference between revision and editing. So when you're revising, you're looking at the big questions of a paper. You're asking yourself, did I get my purpose right? Did I get my thesis? Did I convey the message I wanted to say? Does this essay have a point? Does it have a purpose? One of the other things you're going to think about is, did I say it to the right people? Did I think about my audience? Did I convey what I wanted to say to the people I wanted to say it to? You're going to think about your organization. You're going to ask yourself, does this holistic essay flow together? Does this all make sense? Does each paragraph have a purpose, a topic? Are those strong topics? Are they weak? That's revision. That's when you're thinking about the major parts of your essay. Editing is a little different. Editing is when you start looking sentence by sentence and you're asking yourself, was this sentence too short? Did this sentence have a purpose? Do I have my commas in the right place? Did I use the right adverbs and adjectives? Did I spell this correctly? Did I use the right effect? Did I use a comma where it was supposed to go? That's when you're starting to check the little nuts and bolts. When you think about these two things, ask yourself, what's the most important? It's revision. Revision is always the most important because it's the main meat of your paper. It's where your major points are going to come from on a rubric. That's what counts the most. Editing is important because when we see a well-edited paper, we're more likely to believe it. We are more likely to realize that it's academic, collegiate work, that it's written by someone who was thoughtful. But the message and who you're trying to get that message to, that is the most important. Did you articulate what you wanted to say? And did you articulate who you wanted to say it to? So guys, that's the major part of the writing process. We're going to talk a little bit more about that this week. We're going to talk a whole lot about that as the semester progresses because you're going to continue working on it. You're going to continue figuring out what that looks like for you. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this gives you an overview of what we're going to get started on this week. And I will see you in the next lecture.